Assalamu alaikum and welcome back. We just discussed the whole sequence of events causing depolarization of the skeletal muscle membrane. Now, a problem with this whole sequence of events at any single point causes problems with neurotransmission. If asked to summarize this whole sequence of events in a single phrase, I will rephrase it like acetylcholine mediated sodium influx causing depolarization. Now, rephrasing it this way actually highlights the central role of acetylcholine in this process. A relative change in acetylcholine secretion here in the synaptic cleft is associated with a corresponding change in neurotransmission. A relative increase in acetylcholine secretion here in synaptic cleft simply means repetitive stimulation of the skeletal muscle membrane. Now, since depolarization is a signal for skeletal muscles to contract, repetitive stimulation here in this case simply means repetitive contractions of the skeletal muscles, and it ends up in muscle spasms. Okay. Similarly, a relative drop of acetylcholine here in the synaptic cleft is associated with poor or partial depolarization of the skeletal muscle membrane, resulting in muscle weakness or in severe cases paralysis of the skeletal muscles. Okay. Well, it is very rare for acetylcholine secretion in the synaptic cleft to actually increase or drop. However, we have situations which mimic an increase in acetylcholine secretion here in the synaptic cleft. And the first such example is with the use of drugs like nicotine, methacholine and carbachol. What these drugs do, they behave like acetylcholine. They are not acetylcholine, but they behave like acetylcholine. They bind with the acetylcholine receptors here in the postsynaptic membrane and cause depolarization of the skeletal muscles. Now, unlike acetylcholine, these drugs are either not destroyed by acetylcholine esterase or they are destroyed so slowly that they stay there for longer times than usual, causing repetitive muscle stimulation and ending up in muscle spasms. And one more such example is with the use of drugs like neostigmine, physostigmine and diisopropyl fluorophosphate. What they actually do, they inhibit the enzyme acetylcholine esterase. So whatever amount of acetylcholine is normally secreted in the synaptic cleft, that stays there for a longer duration because acetylcholine esterase is not there to destroy it. And owing to its longer stay in the synaptic cleft, it causes repetitive stimulation of the skeletal muscle fiber, resulting in muscle spasms. Now, among these, neostigmine and physostigmine have shorter durations of action. They cause inhibition of acetylcholine esterase for say for 10 to 12 hours, and that makes them ideal agents for treatment of conditions like myasthenia gravis. Okay. However, the later one, diisopropyl fluorophosphate, is an organophosphorus pesticide that causes inhibition of acetylcholine esterase that spans over weeks. So, owing to its much longer duration of action, that can potentially cause life-threatening paralysis and has been used in biological warfare. On the other hand, we have conditions which mimic a drop in acetylcholine secretion in the synaptic cleft. And one such example is with the drug tubocurarine. This is actually an anesthetic agent, and what it does, it competes with acetylcholine for its receptor binding sites here on the postsynaptic membrane. So even though we have normal concentration of acetylcholine in the synaptic cleft, but because it has trouble binding with its receptors, there is incomplete or partial depolarization of the skeletal muscle fiber, and it results in muscle weakness and in severe cases even paralysis. Okay. One more such example is the disease we call myasthenia gravis. Myasthenia gravis is an autoimmune condition where we have autoimmune destruction of the nicotinic acetylcholine receptors here on the postsynaptic membrane. So even though acetylcholine is normally secreted into the synaptic cleft, but because many of its receptors are destroyed in this disease, we have incomplete or partial depolarization of the skeletal muscles, and as a result we have skeletal muscle weakness that may progress to frank paralysis and more severe disease. Clinically, it may involve any of the skeletal muscle groups in the body, any of the skeletal muscle groups, but in the classical case it begins with involvement of the muscles of the eyelids. So that causes drooping of the eyelids. With more severe disease, it descends in a characteristic downward fashion, so that is one reason we call it descending paralysis, so that we can have involvement of the bulbar muscles causing problems with swallowing. We can have involvement of the respiratory muscles causing problems with breathing, and of course there is involvement of the limb muscles as well. We will have a more dedicated lecture on myasthenia gravis sooner or later, but for the time being what I want you to understand is that problems with neurotransmission are not just limited to acetylcholine or its receptors. Rather, problems with any component of the neuromuscular junction may cause problems with neurotransmission. For example, diseases affecting the motor nerves, the motor neuropathies, diseases of the spinal cord and brain, malfunction of these ion channels involved in this process may all cause problems with neurotransmission. So this is where we can aid to our understanding and knowledge.